Sometimes the loudest cries for help don't come from the strong or the brave, but from a child too small to carry the weight of the world. The rumble of Harley-Davidson engines tore through the quiet September afternoon on Elm. Street like thunder rolling across still water. 4 motorcycles, black leather gleaming under the Arizona sun, rolled into the struggling south side of Flagstaff. Their riders wore vests bearing the silver insignia of the Iron Brotherhood, veterans forged in war. Shadows stretching long across cracked pavement. Neighbors froze. Curtains twitched. Mothers pulled children indoors. But beneath that thunder of chrome and steel, a smaller, softer voice rose. Trembling, heartbreaking, impossible to ignore. A 7-year-old girl stood at the edge of the sidewalk, one small hand clutching a cardboard sign, the other gripping the collar of a magnificent German shepherd. Her purple shirt hung too large on her thin shoulders. Tears carved clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. "Sir," she called out as the lead biker slowed. "Will you buy my dog, please?" Her voice cracked. "My mother hasn't eaten anything for 2 days." Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now, let's continue the story. 20 feet behind the girl, beneath a towering ponderosa pine, a woman sat slumped against the trunk. An Afghan was wrapped around her shoulders despite the 72nd degree in warmth. Her eyes remained closed, skin the color of old paper. She wore an oversized flannel. A man's shirt, faded and worn, sleeves rolled past thin wrists. The tree shade couldn't hide how her chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular rhythms. The girl's name was Sarah Hayes, 7 years old, though the hollows beneath her eyes belonged to someone much older. Her purple t-shirt had been her father's favorite color. She wore it 3 days a week now, even though it hung past her knees. The knee of her jeans bore a careful patch, stitched in uneven lines by small, determined hands. Duct tape wrapped around the sole of her left sneaker, where it had separated from the canvas. Her brown hair, pulled into a lopsided ponytail, hadn't seen shampoo in days. The cardboard sign trembled in her grip. "Duke, good dog. $50 or best offer." The letters wobbled, written in purple crayon. The German shepherd beside her stood 24 inches at the shoulder, 75 pounds of black and tan loyalty. Duke's coat, normally lustrous, had dulled from weeks of sparse feeding. His ribs showed faintly through his fur when he breathed, but his posture remained proud, ears alert, dark eyes watchful. He sat at perfect heel beside Sarah, not in front as an untrained dog might, his body angled to keep both the girl and the woman in his peripheral vision. When the motorcycles had first rumbled into view, his muscles had tensed, but he hadn't barked. Training ran deeper than hunger. The lead biker cut his engine. James Sullivan, though his brothers called him Hawkeye, stood 6'1", broad-shouldered beneath black leather. At 48, his beard showed threads of silver. Tattoos covered his forearms, an eagle clutching an anchor on his right arm. And over his heart, visible when his vest shifted, a name inscribed, Ethan. His hands, calloused from years of motorcycle repair, gripped the handlebars as he studied the scene before him. The other 3 bikers idled their engines low, waiting. They'd ridden together long enough to communicate in glances. Hawkeye's jaw tightened. His hand moved unconsciously to touch the name over his heart. Then slowly, deliberately, he swung his leg over the bike and removed his helmet. He knelt on the hot pavement, bringing himself to Sarah's eye level. The asphalt's heat seeped through his jeans. Up close, he could see the tear tracks cutting through the dust on her face, the way her small hand trembled where it gripped Duke's collar. The dog's eyes tracked every movement, assessing threat level, but his tail remained low and still, anxious, yet not aggressive. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Hawkeye's voice came out gentler than his appearance suggested. "Sarah." She swallowed hard. "Sarah Hayes, and this is Duke." She nodded, tears pooling again. "He's a good dog. Really good. He doesn't bark at people or anything, and he's smart. My daddy taught him tricks." The other bikers had dismounted now. Marcus Wrench Patterson, 6'3" and built like a linebacker, stood to Hawkeye's right. Thomas Red O'Brien, his rust-colored beard catching the afternoon light, approached from the left. David Preacher Mitchell, the eldest at 51, hung back slightly, his weathered face grave. Red moved past them toward the woman under the tree. He'd been a paramedic for 15 years before the Marines, and those instincts never died. He knelt beside her, fingers finding her wrist. Her pulse fluttered, weak and rapid, beneath his touch. Her skin felt clammy despite the warmth. When he gently lifted one eyelid, her pupil responded sluggishly. "Ma'am." Red's voice carried practiced calm. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered but didn't open. A soft moan escaped her lips. Red looked back at Hawkeye and shook his head once. The message was clear. This woman needed a hospital line now. Hawkeye stood silently, holding the child's hand. "We can't just give them money," he said, voice steady but edged with resolve. "That's a Band-Aid. Someone needs to answer for what happened to that family." Wrench nodded slowly. "You thinking what I'm thinking? Office visit during business hours?" Public, documented. Hawkeye's voice carried the steel of command decisions. No violence, but he's going to hear us. When? Red asked. Tomorrow morning. After we make sure Jenny's stable. Hawkeye looked at each of his brothers. No one hesitated. 3 heads nodded in agreement. In the trauma bay, a doctor emerged, peeling off latex gloves. Her face bore the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too much suffering. She approached the group. Mrs. Hayes is stable for now. Her blood glucose was 42. Critically low. We've started IV glucose and insulin therapy. She's also severely dehydrated and malnourished. We're admitting her for observation. She should be able to see her daughter in about 30 minutes. Will she be okay? Sarah had appeared at Hawkeye's elbow. Duke pressed protectively against her leg. The doctor knelt to meet Sarah's eyes. Your mom is very sick, she said gently, but you got her here in time. That took a lot of courage. Sarah nodded, though disbelief still clouded her face. The doctor stood and turned to Hawkeye. Are you family? We are now, he said. 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. Sarah sat rigid in the waiting room chair, Duke's head resting on her lap. The dog's eyes never closed, constantly scanning the room. Alert, watchful, ready. Maggie Chen had returned from the vending machine with water and crackers, coaxing Sarah to eat something. The girl managed 2 small bites before her stomach rebelled. When a nurse finally appeared and said Sarah could see her mother, the child was on her feet before the words even finished leaving the nurse's mouth. Duke rose with her, shadowing her steps down the antiseptic hallway. The nurse led them into a room where machines beeped rhythmic reassurance, and IV lines snaked into Jenny Hayes' pale arm. Jenny's eyes opened weakly when Sarah entered. Baby, she whispered, her voice cracked and raw. Sarah burst into tears and rushed to the bedside. Duke positioned himself beside the bed, close enough to monitor, but not intrusive. Jenny's free hand reached for her daughter's face. I'm so sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Mommy. The nice bikers helped us. Jenny's gaze found Hawkeye standing in the doorway. You paid for this, she murmured, her voice a fragile mix of shame and gratitude. It's handled, Hawkeye said simply. I can't. I don't know how I'll ever repay. You don't. He stepped closer. You just get better. For her. Jenny's tears came then. Silent, exhausted, but cleansing. Sarah climbed carefully onto the bed, curling against her mother's side. Duke's tail gave a single slow wag, the first since the ordeal began. The women he'd protected were together again. Safe for now. Hawkeye left them alone and returned to the waiting room, where his brothers had gathered evidence like generals planning a campaign. Wrench had his laptop open, displaying employment records he'd accessed through old contacts. Red had printed news articles about the company. Preacher was jotting notes in his small, neat handwriting, but watching Sarah reunite with her mother had cracked something open in Hawkeye's chest. A memory flooded in, unbidden. Another hospital room, another child, a different kind of goodbye. The June morning had been crystalline, perfect, the kind of Arizona day that promised nothing could go wrong. Jake Hayes had kissed his wife, ruffled his daughter's hair, and headed to the station house. It was supposed to be a routine day. Structure fires happened, but the tunnel fire wasn't supposed to be that kind of fire. Wildland, yes. Dangerous, yes, but controllable. By 3 o'clock, the winds had shifted. The fire crowned, jumping from treetop to treetop faster than anyone could run. Jake's crew had been evacuating a family at the fire's edge. A mother, father, and 2 children trapped by flames. Jake got them out. Then he went back for the family dog. The roof came down while he was inside. The battalion chief arrived at the Hayes home at 6:17. Sarah, playing in the yard with Duke, saw the department car pull up. She knew before the chief's boots touched the driveway. Children understand death in ways adults forget. She dropped her jump rope and ran inside, calling for her mother. Jenny heard her daughter's screams and knew too. Some news doesn't need words. The funeral was 3 days later. Full honors. Bagpipes playing Amazing Grace. A flag folded with military precision, handed to Jenny with words that meant nothing and everything. Sarah stood between her mother and Duke, her face blank with shock. She didn't cry. Not then. The tears would come later, in the dark, when she thought no one could hear. But Duke heard. The dog had howled during the 21-gun salute. 7 riflemen, 3 volleys each, the sound echoing across the cemetery. Animals know. They sense what humans try to hide. Jenny had held herself together through the service, through the reception at the station house, through the parade of well-meaning neighbors bringing casseroles and sympathy. Only after the last person left, after Sarah was asleep, did she collapse in the bathroom. A towel pressed to her mouth so her daughter wouldn't hear her. Screaming grief into terry cloth. That was 18 months ago. The beginning of the end. Jenny told this story to Hawkeye and his brothers that evening, her voice steady despite the tears. Sarah had fallen asleep on the hospital bed, Duke curled impossibly large at her feet. The nurses had given up enforcing the no animals rule. Some situations demanded grace. Jake bought Duke about 6 months before he died, Jenny said softly. He found him near a burned building, skinny, scarred. Someone told him the dog used to be a search and rescue animal, but he got lost in a warehouse fire. His handler died in that fire. Duke survived, but he was traumatized. She looked down at the sleeping dog. Jake brought him home and told Sarah that Duke needed us as much as we'd need him. He trained him himself, taught him to protect, to alert when something was wrong, to comfort. He'd say, "When I'm at work, Duke's your guardian." Her voice broke. It wasn't a joke. It was a prophecy. Wrench shifted in his chair. "Your husband sounds like he was a good man. The best." Jenny's smile was sad. Everyone loved him. The whole department came to the funeral. The community raised $20,000 for us. I thought we'd be okay. I went back to work after 2 months. I was doing well. My boss said I was on track for a promotion to manager. What changed? Red asked gently. The company got new board members last year. Everything shifted. Suddenly it was all about profit margins and efficiency. They started looking at who cost too much. I have diabetes. Developed it about 6 months after Jake died. My doctor said it was stress-induced. Grief can literally make you sick. The insurance covered it. But I guess I became a liability. She picked at the hospital blanket. They called me in 6 weeks ago. Rick Thornton, the CEO, couldn't even look me in the eye. Said the company was restructuring. My position was being eliminated. He handed me a severance package and had security escort me out within the hour. I tried to explain. I told him I was a single mother, that my husband had just died, that I needed the insurance for my medicine. Her voice went flat. He said, "I can't run a charity. You're replaceable." The words hung in the air like stones dropped in deep water. That son of a... Wrench caught himself. "He's not wrong," Jenny said quietly. "I am replaceable. To them, I'm just a number on a spreadsheet. My husband died serving this community, and it didn't matter. My daughter is 7 years old, and it didn't matter. I was an excellent employee for 8 years, and it didn't matter. None of it mattered because the bottom line was more important than..." She stopped, breathing hard. The heart monitor beeped faster. "Easy," Red said. "Don't work yourself up." Jenny closed her eyes. "I applied to 47 jobs in 6 weeks. You know how many callbacks I got? 3, and all 3 said I was overqualified. What does that even mean?" Wrench muttered. "That I'm too educated to deserve work? Too experienced to be affordable? I sold everything. The car, the furniture, Jake's tools. That one hurt the most. Those tools were his father's before him. But I needed to feed Sarah. I needed my medicine. But the medicine ran out." Hawkeye said softly. She nodded. "Insulin costs $300 a month without insurance. I couldn't afford it, so I stopped taking it. Then I started getting sick. Then I couldn't afford food. I gave Sarah everything I could, but it wasn't enough. And yesterday," her voice cracked completely. "Yesterday she came to me with Duke and said she wanted to sell him. Said he deserved a family who could feed him properly. My 7-year-old daughter was trying to sell her dog. Her last connection to her father, and to keep me alive." Room fell silent except for the rhythmic beep of machines and Duke's slow breathing. Preacher spoke at last. "Sometimes the system's designed to break people," he said quietly. "It's not an accident. It's the design." Meanwhile, across town, in a glass tower overlooking downtown Flagstaff, Richard Thornton sat alone in his office. It was 7:30 in the evening. His assistant had left at 5. The rest of the floor was dark. Rick remained, as he had most nights for the past year, staring at a computer screen showing quarterly profits, and a resignation letter he'd drafted 6 months ago but never sent. The office was everything success was supposed to look like. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the San Francisco peaks, awards lining one wall, Business Leader of the Year, Innovator Award, philanthropy recognition. His desk was mahogany, vast and gleaming. His chair cost more than most used cars. On the credenza behind him sat a photograph, face down. It had been that way for a year. His ex-wife, Melissa, didn't deserve to watch him work anymore. Rick was 52, exhausted in ways sleep couldn't fix. His medicine cabinet at home was lined with pills for ulcers, anxiety, high blood pressure, and insomnia. His doctor had suggested therapy. Rick had laughed. Men like him didn't need therapy. They needed to be stronger, harder, to survive. But sometimes, late at night, he remembered a different version of himself. Preacher emerged from the chapel. "I've been thinking about Matthew 21, he said quietly. "When Jesus cleared the temple, sometimes righteous anger is holy. Sometimes the tables need to be overturned." "Metaphorically," Hawkeye said. "Of course." Preacher's smile was slight. "But metaphors can be loud." They gathered in the hospital cafeteria at 11 that night. making final preparations. Maggie Chen had joined them, insisting she wanted to help. I knew Jennifer and Sarah needed help, and I did nothing, she said firmly. I won't make that mistake again. You're here now, Hawkeye told her. That's what matters. Is it, though? Maggie's hands trembled slightly as she held her coffee cup. I'm 72 years old. I've lived in that neighborhood for 40 years. I've seen people struggle before. I always told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that people have pride, that offering help might be insulting. She shook her head slowly. That's what we tell ourselves when we're scared, when we're afraid that helping someone else means admitting we could end up in the same place. You're on a fixed income, Red said. Social Security doesn't go far. $1,100 a month, Maggie confirmed. My house is paid off, thank God, but everything else, food, medicine, utilities, it's tight. After my husband died, my son helped for a while, but then he moved to Seattle and we had words about politics, about things that seemed important at the time. We haven't spoken in 2 years, her voice cracked. So I know what Jennifer's going through. The loneliness, the invisibility. I saw it and recognized it. And still I did nothing because I was terrified that tomorrow it could be me under that tree. Hawkeye reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're doing something now. The hospital quieted as midnight approached. Visiting hours had long passed, but the staff had stopped enforcing rules for this particular room. Sarah slept, her mother's arm wrapped protectively around her. Duke stretched across the foot of the bed like a living security blanket. Jenny lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The IV dripped steadily, replenishing what months of starvation had depleted. Her blood sugar had stabilized. The doctor said she'd need several days of observation, nutrition counseling, a revised treatment plan for her diabetes, and therapy for the depression that had taken root alongside her grief. All of it would cost thousands of dollars she didn't have, except, somehow, impossibly, it was already paid for by a stranger, by a man who wore leather and tattoos and looked like the kind of person you'd cross the street to avoid, by someone who'd seen her daughter on a street corner and stopped. Tomorrow, Jenny had learned these men were going to confront her former boss. She'd tried to protest, didn't want anyone getting in trouble on her account, didn't want to make things worse. But Hawkeye had been firm. This isn't just about you, he'd said. It's about a system that crushes people. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to someone else. She didn't know if it would help, didn't know if anything could change. But lying in that hospital bed with her daughter safe beside her, Jenny allowed herself something she hadn't felt in months. Hope morning came too early, and not soon enough. Sarah woke first, disoriented until she remembered where she was. Duke's tail thumped once against the mattress. The dog hadn't moved all night except to shift when Sarah stirred, maintaining his protective vigil, even in sleep. A different doctor came by on morning rounds. She reviewed Jenny's chart, asked questions, adjusted medication dosages. Your diabetes is stress-induced, she explained. Your body's been in crisis mode since your husband passed. Grief affects us physically, not just emotionally. You'll need insulin, yes, but you'll also need support, therapy, community, a safety net. I don't have insurance, Jenny said quietly. We're going to figure that out, the doctor promised. The hospital has a social worker who specializes in these situations. She'll be by this afternoon. After the doctor left, Sarah did homework at the bedside table. Math problems about money that felt cruelly ironic. If you have $50 and spend $12, how much is left? Sarah wrote in the margin, not enough. Never enough. Duke watched her write, his intelligent eyes tracking the pencil's movement. Sometimes Sarah thought the dog understood more than most people gave him credit for. At 10:00 a.m., 4 bikers arrived at the Grand Canyon Tours and Hospitality building downtown. They'd cleaned their leathers, removed any patches that looked aggressive, and carried themselves with the bearing of men who'd served their country and weren't intimidated by corporate towers. Maggie Chen came with them, dressed in her Sunday best, a witness to what happened to people who fell through society's cracks. The confrontation was about to begin. The lobby of Grand Canyon Tours and Hospitality gleamed with the sterile perfection of corporate success marble. Floors reflected overhead lighting. Chrome and glass sculptures represented something abstract and expensive. A fountain burbled with water that never ran dry. Unlike the resources of people like Jenny Hayes, the receptionist's smile froze when 4 large bikers walked through the revolving door. Maggie Chen behind them. Her hand moved instinctively toward the phone. Toward security, toward protection from men who looked like trouble. Can I help you? Her voice carried professional courtesy stretched thin over fear. Hawkeye approached the desk, his posture deliberately non-threatening. We're here to see Richard Thornton. Do you have an appointment? No, but he'll want to see us. Tell him it's about Jennifer Hayes. The name meant nothing to the receptionist, just another former employee among hundreds. She reached for the phone. I'll need to call security. I'm a former employee, Wrench said, stepping forward. His size made the statement carry weight. I have a legal right to be in this building. We're not here to cause trouble. We just want 5 minutes of Mr. Thornton's time." The receptionist hesitated. In that moment of uncertainty, a businessman passing through the lobby noticed the tension. He pulled out his phone and started filming. Within seconds, the video was streaming live to social media. A caption formed, "Veterans confront company that fired widow." Hawkeye noticed the camera but didn't stop it. Instead, he addressed it directly. "We're here for Jenny Hayes and her daughter, Sarah. Mrs. Hayes worked for this company for 8 years. She was an excellent employee. Her husband died serving this community as a firefighter. 6 weeks ago, this company fired her during restructuring. She has diabetes. She lost her insurance. Yesterday, her 7-year-old daughter tried to sell her dog to buy food because her mother hadn't eaten in 2 days." Receptionist's face went pale. The businessman kept filming. Views were climbing. 500, 1,000, 1,000. The intercom on the receptionist's desk crackled. Rick Thornton's voice came through, tight with tension. "Send them up." The elevator ride took 45 seconds. Nobody spoke. Wrench's jaw worked silently. Red's fingers drummed against his thigh. Preacher's lips moved in silent prayer. Maggie clutched her purse. Hawkeye touched the tattoo over his heart, Ethan's name, and steadied his breathing. The elevator opened onto the executive floor. More glass, more chrome. More expensive. Nothing. Rick's assistant stood outside his office door, her face unreadable. "He's expecting you." Rick Thornton sat behind a desk that could have paid Jenny's rent for 6 months. He was 52 but looked older. Thinning hair, stress lines carved deep around his mouth, an expensive suit that couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. His hands rested flat on the desk, not quite steady. "Mr. Thornton," Hawkeye said, entering without invitation. "Thank you for seeing us." Rick's eyes moved from face to face, landing finally on Wrench. Recognition flickered. "Marcus, you remember me?" Wrench's voice carried no warmth. "I wasn't sure you would. Just another number on your termination list." Rick swallowed hard. "What is this about?" Hawkeye placed Sarah's cardboard sign on the desk. The purple crayon letters faced Rick, Duke, good dog, $50 or best offer. Rick stared at it, not comprehending. "This sign," Hawkeye said quietly, "was held by a 7-year-old girl yesterday afternoon. She was standing on a street corner trying to sell her dog to buy food for her mother." He pulled out his phone and showed Rick the photo he'd taken. Sarah's tear-streaked face, Duke sitting loyally beside her, the too big purple shirt, the duct-taped shoe. "Her mother is Jennifer Hayes," Hawkeye continued. "The woman you fired 6 weeks ago." Rick's face drained of color. "I gave her severance. I followed protocol." "You followed protocol," Hawkeye repeated, his voice like a blade. "You gave her 2 weeks' salary. You handed her COBRA insurance information that costs more per month than her rent. You had security escort her out within an hour. The board required cuts. I had no choice." "You always have a choice." Wrench slapped a folder on the desk. "Jenny's performance reviews. 8 years of excellent ratings. Not one disciplinary action. Not one complaint. She was on track for promotion before you fired her." Red added another folder. "Company financials, second quarter 2024. Record profits, 17% increase over the previous year. Stock price at an all-time high." Preacher placed a third folder. "Your compensation package. Base salary, $320,000. Bonus that quarter, $200,000. For cost-cutting measures." Maggie Chen stepped forward, her elderly voice shaking but determined. "I'm Jennifer's neighbor. I watched her get thinner. Watched the lights get shut off. Watched her 7-year-old daughter become the adult because there was no one else. And I did nothing because I was scared." "What's your excuse, Mr. Thornton?" Rick stood abruptly, walking to the window. His hands gripped the frame. "You don't understand the board. There are shareholders. I'm not the villain here." "Then who is?" Hawkeye asked. "Because someone decided that Jenny Hayes' life was worth less than your quarterly profits. Someone decided that a widow and her child were replaceable. Someone sat in this office and said those words to a woman who just lost her husband. I didn't." Rick's voice cracked. "I didn't want to, but you did." Wrench's voice held pain alongside anger. "Just like you fired me 3 years ago. Same pressure. Same board. Same excuses. I understand, Rick. I understand you're trapped. But you chose to stay trapped. You chose your comfort over our survival." Rick turned from the window. For the first time, his professional mask cracked. "You want to know the truth?" he said. 20 years ago, I was where you are. I was the one begging. I proposed an idea that would have saved this company millions. The CEO rejected it. Politics over merit. I stayed stuck while less qualified people climbed over me. My wife left because I was too nice to win." His voice rose. "So I stopped being nice. I became what I needed to be to survive. And yes, I hate it. Yes, it's killing me." He yanked open his desk drawer and pulled out pill bottles. Ulcers, anxiety, blood pressure, insomnia. This job is destroying me. But what choice do I have? I have a mortgage, child support, bills. If I don't do what the board says, they replace me with someone who will. I'm not the villain. You're just surviving at someone else's expense, Hawkeye finished. We're all surviving, Mr. Thornton. The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice to keep your corner office? Rick sank into his chair. His hands covered his face. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I remember firing her, he whispered. She begged me for one more week. Her daughter's birthday was coming. She needed the insurance for her diabetes medication. And I said, he looked up, tears in his eyes. I said, I can't run a charity. You're replaceable. The words hung in the air like poison. Those were the exact words the CEO used on me 20 years ago, Rick whispered. I became what I hated. I became the person who hurt me. His phone rang. He glanced at it, the board chairman, and let it ring. I have a resignation letter, Rick said, opening a file on his computer. Drafted it 6 months ago. Never sent it. Because I'm a coward. Resigning doesn't fix what you did, Red said quietly. I know. Rick's voice was hollow, but maybe it's a start. He picked up his desk phone and dialed. Carlos, it's Rick, I resign. Sometimes the weight of guilt hits harder than any punishment, and redemption arrives only when it's far too late to matter. Effective immediately. Rick's voice trembled as he spoke into the phone. A long pause followed. Handle it however you want. I'm done. He hung up slowly, the color drained from his face. Turning to the bikers, he said quietly, I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make it right. Jenny's medical bills, and they're covered. Covered? Hawkeye asked, uncertain. Her job, too, Rick added. I'll reinstate her. Back pay, full benefits. You just resigned, Wrench pointed out. You can't promise that. Rick's jaw tightened. Then I'll fight the board. I'll testify if there's a lawsuit. I'll use everything I know about their practices. I'll burn it down if I have to. Just then, his assistant burst through the door. Mr. Thornton, security is on their way. The board wants these people removed. Rick straightened his tie, calm but resolute. Tell security to stand down. These are my guests. Sir, the board can go to hell. He grabbed his jacket and turned to the others. I'm going to the hospital to apologize in person. That's not, Hawkeye began. I know it's not enough, Rick interrupted. I know an apology doesn't pay bills or give back time or undo trauma, but it's what I can do right now. And after that, I'll figure out how to fix the rest. They left the building together. 4 bikers, 1 elderly woman, and 1 fallen executive, as security arrived too late. Behind them, Rick's assistant stood in the doorway, tears in her eyes. She'd worked for the company for 10 years and watched it change. Watched him change. Watched good people get crushed. Outside, the video that started it all had gone viral. Your Save Jenny was trending locally. The news was spreading fast. The local paper was calling. Television vans were already pulling up to the glass towers they had just left behind. In the car ride to the hospital, Rick sat in silence, his phone buzzing nonstop. Calls from board members, lawyers, his ex-wife. He ignored them all, but when they arrived at Flagstaff Medical Center, a new crisis was waiting. Red's phone rang first. He listened, then his face went white. Jenny's condition had taken a turn for the worse. They sprinted through the parking lot, burst through the hospital doors, racing down the sterile hallway where Sarah's screams echoed off the walls. Mommy! Mommy, please wake up! Duke stood guard at the ICU door. Hackles raised, growling, the first aggressive sound he'd made since this nightmare began. His instincts screamed danger. Something was very wrong. A doctor emerged, her face drawn and grave. Mrs. Hayes has gone into diabetic ketoacidosis, she said. We're doing everything we can, but the next few hours are critical. Her organs are under severe stress from prolonged malnutrition. We may need to, she didn't finish. The crash cart was already being wheeled in. Sarah collapsed against Hawkeye, sobbing. I should have sold Duke sooner. This is my fault. I waited too long. No? Hawkeye said firmly, kneeling so their eyes met. No, sweetheart, this is not your fault. Do you hear me? It's not your fault. But Sarah wasn't listening. She stared through the ICU window as nurses rushed in and out, as machines beeped and alarms screamed, as her mother's fragile body fought for. Life. Rick Thornton stood frozen in the hallway. Watched that little girl beg her mother to wake up, and every excuse he'd ever told himself disintegrated. This was the cost of his protocol. This, child screams, this mother's dying. Body, this family destroyed. All so quarterly profits could ice. I did this, Rick whispered. Oh, God. I did this. The next 6 hours blurred into chaos. Medical interventions, alarms, hushed voices. Jenny's kidneys were failing. Her body had crossed a point of no return. Dialysis began. More machines. More specialists. More bills, climbing so high they made Hawkeye's maxed-out credit cards look like pocket change. Sarah refused to leave the ICU waiting room. Duke lay across her feet like a stone sentinel. She wasn't crying anymore, just staring, hollow-eyed, toward the closed doors. Hawkeye recognized that look. He'd seen it in war zones, on soldiers who'd lost too much. He'd seen it in his own reflection after Emma and Ethan were gone. The look of someone whose hope had been completely used up. A pediatric nurse approached around 3 a.m., her voice soft and cautious. "Honey, when's the last time you ate?" Sarah didn't respond. "Sweetheart?" The nurse tried again. "She gave me her food," Sarah said finally, voice flat and lifeless. "For 3 days she said she wasn't hungry, but she was lying. I knew she was lying, and I still ate it, because I was hungry. And I didn't know what else to do." The nurse's face fell. She knelt beside the girl, checking her pulse, her skin, her eyes. Then she frowned deeply. "I'm getting a doctor." 20 minutes later, Sarah was in an exam room of her own. Dehydration, malnutrition, acute stress reaction. The pediatrician's tone was clipped but furious. "This child weighs 42 pounds. She should weigh at least 50 for her age. She's severely malnourished. I'm admitting her." "No!" Sarah tried to climb off the table. "I need to stay with Mommy. She swayed dizzy. Hawkeye caught her before she hit the floor. "Easy, sweetheart. Easy what? They can't keep me," she cried. "Mommy needs me. Duke needs me." "I have to. You have to let them help you," Hawkeye said gently. "Your mom would want you to be okay." But Sarah's panic only grew. "If they keep me, CPS will come. The lady at school said if kids don't have parents, CPS takes them away. They'll take me. They won't let me see Mommy again. Or Duke." She was hyperventilating now, her small body shaking with terror. Nurses rushed in with oxygen. And at 4:30 a.m., her nightmare became real. A woman in a blazer with a county ID badge approached the nurse's station. Child Protective Services. Protocol, that cursed word again. Maggie Chen stepped in front of the CPS worker, frail but fierce. "That child has family," she said firmly. "She has people who love her. Are you a blood relative?" the caseworker asked, exhausted, tablet in hand. "I'm her neighbor," Maggie replied. "Then I'm sorry, ma'am." Maggie's eyes burned. Her father died serving this community. Her mother's fighting for her life 20 feet from here. That little girl's been through hell. And now you want to take her away from the only people she has left? "Ma'am, I understand. But we have procedures." "Your procedures," Maggie said, trembling, "are going to traumatize her worse than poverty ever could." The worker's expression softened, pain flickering behind her professionalism. "I don't make the rules. Just trying to protect, then protect her," Maggie said fiercely, "by letting her stay with people who care." But love wasn't a legal category. Reports had to be filed. Custody reviewed. The machine moved forward. Heartless, unstoppable. Meanwhile, another blow fell. A hospital administrator approached Hawkeye. Polite but cold. "Mr. Sullivan, we have a problem. Your credit card's been declined for additional charges. Mrs. Hayes' treatment has now exceeded $30,000. I'll get another card," Hawkeye said. "Sir, even if you do, the total could exceed $100,000. We have charity care options, but it takes time." "How long before you stop treating her?" Hawkeye asked quietly. The silence that followed was answer enough. Hospitals couldn't refuse care, but they could ration it. And in another wing, Rick Thornton sat alone on a bench staring at his shaking hands. His phone buzzed with messages. The board had rejected his resignation. He was on administrative leave. His promises, reinstatement, medical coverage, all voided. The interim CEO had already released a statement. Mr. Thornton's unauthorized commitments do not represent company policy. He'd lost everything and changed nothing. The system had simply swallowed him and kept grinding forward. At 5 a.m., another storm hit. The hospital's legal department had traced Duke's microchip. The dog belonged to the Flagstaff Fire Department, property of the late Thomas Mitchell. His widow, Carol Mitchell, had been contacted. She was driving from Phoenix. Expected arrival, 8 a.m. When Wrench told Sarah, she just stared blankly. "They're taking Duke too?" He hesitated. "We don't know yet. They're taking everything," she whispered. "Mommy, me, Duke. Everything Daddy left us." Her voice was empty. "Too old for 7 years. Too broken for words." Wrench turned away, unable to look at her. Preacher sat alone in the chapel, Bible open but unread. He'd prayed for hours, but heaven stayed silent. Where was God in all this? Where was mercy? Red paced the hall, making calls, trying to raise money through the viral video. $20,000 raised. $100,000 needed. People watched. People shared. People cried. But tears don't pay hospital bills. Sympathy isn't legal tender. Sometimes it's not the sound of gunfire that breaks a soldier. It's the sound of a heart monitor falling silent. At 6 p.m., Jenny Hayes' heart stopped for the first time. The crash team stormed into the ICU. Gloved hands, flashing paddles, sterile chaos. 40 seconds of CPR, one long eternity. Then a flicker, beep, they brought her back. But the neurologist's grim order for an EEG told the truth none of them wanted to face. Her brain had gone too long without oxygen. Outside the room, Sarah heard the code. The words. The running feet. The silence that followed. She didn't cry, didn't scream. Just turned to Hawkeye and asked in a voice too calm for a 7-year-old, "Is Mommy dead?" Hawkeye's throat locked. "No, sweetheart. The doctors saved her. But she's very sick. She's going to die," Sarah said flatly, "like Daddy did. And I'm going to be alone." There was no question in her tone, just certainty. The kind that only comes when life has already taught you not to hope. Hawkeye wanted to lie, to promise her everything would be okay. But he couldn't, because in that moment, watching this child's eyes go hollow, watching this system grind another soul into dust, he didn't believe it himself. They'd fought the villain, exposed the truth, made him confess. And still, it hadn't mattered. The machine was winning. The system that crushed the poor to feed the powerful was working exactly as intended. Duke whimpered softly and pressed closer to Sarah, his instincts screaming that danger was near. But even a war dog couldn't fight this kind of enemy. Some battles had no front lines, only heartbreak. Outside, the sun slipped behind the San Francisco peaks, painting the sky in cruel beauty, orange, violet, gold. The world moved on. Somewhere, people laughed over dinner. Somewhere, families hugged without fear of losing one another to medical debt. But here, in the cold light of the ICU, hope was dying. Jenny Hayes lay motionless beneath white sheets, machines breathing for her. In another ward, Sarah stared blankly at the ceiling, eyes dry, spirit broken. In the parking lot, Rick Thornton sat inside his car, a man stripped of purpose, staring at his reflection in the windshield, a reflection of guilt. And in the waiting room, 4 veterans, men who had survived bullets, bombs, and battlefields, were powerless against paperwork and policy, defeated not by war, but by bureaucracy. The darkness felt total, and yet, 7:45, when hope was at its weakest pulse, Hawkeye's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. But something made him answer. "Is this James Sullivan?" The voice on the other end was young, trembling, familiar. Hawkeye froze. He knew that voice, older now, deeper, but it was his son's. "Who is this?" he asked, heart hammering. "It's Ethan, your son." The world tilted. Hawkeye gripped the chair arm to stay upright. "Ethan?" His voice cracked. "I saw the video," the boy said. "You confronting that CEO, it's everywhere. Mom said you died 5 years ago from the war, but you're alive. You're in Flagstaff. I'm at the Greyhound station." "I didn't know where else to go." Hawkeye's chest tightened, air refusing to come. "Don't move," he said, already sprinting for the exit. "Stay right there." "Coming." He rode like a man possessed. 10-minute drive, done in 6. At the Greyhound terminal, a thin, tall boy sat on a bench, clutching a worn backpack. Dark hair, green eyes, Emma's eyes. When Hawkeye pulled off his helmet, the boy stood. "Dad." No hesitation. They met halfway, and in that embrace, 5 years of grief and lies shattered. "I thought you were gone," Ethan sobbed. "I'm here," Hawkeye whispered. "I never stopped looking for you." They stood locked together, father and son, the world shrinking to the space between heartbeats. When Hawkeye finally pulled back, tears glistened in both their eyes. "Your mom, she told you I died?" Ethan nodded miserably. "After she married Carlos, she said you were too broken to be my dad. Then 2 years ago, she said you were gone." Hawkeye's fists trembled. "I tried to fight her, Ethan, but she got the court order, said I was dangerous." "None of it was true." "I know," Ethan said. "I found her papers, lies, all of it, so I left. Took her cash and found a bus to Flagstaff. When I saw the video, I knew you were still you." Hawkeye laughed through tears. "Mad? Kid, you're the bravest person I know." They rode back to the hospital together, Ethan's arms wrapped tightly around his father's waist, and though the world was still burning, for the first time in years, Hawkeye felt alive. Inside, the group turned as he entered with Ethan. "This is my son," Hawkeye said, voice rough with pride. Wrench stepped forward, clasping the boy's shoulder. "Good to finally meet you, kid. Your dad never stopped talking about you." Before the joy could settle, Rick Thornton approached, face pale. "James, there's something you need to know about your ex-wife." Hawkeye's expression hardened. "What about Emma?" Rick hesitated. "She's married to Carlos Ruiz, the board chairman. Your ex-wife's new husband is my boss." The realization hit like a blow. Ethan's eyes widened. "Carlos, that's my stepdad." "Jesus," Wrench muttered. "It's all connected. The same people who ruined your family." "Ruined Jenny's too," Rick nodded, ashamed. "Emma, Carlos, my ex-wife. Family politics and greed. We were all pawns, maybe," Hawkeye said coldly. "But pawns still make choices." Rick swallowed hard. "Then I'm choosing to help fix this." At 1 p.m., another visitor arrived. Carol Mitchell, a woman in her late 50s, gray hair tied back, a firefighter's widow's bracelet on her wrist. "I'm looking for the Hayes family," she said softly. Hawkeye guided her to Sarah's room. The little girl was asleep. Duke lay across her feet like a guardian statue. When Carol entered, Duke's ears perked. Recognition flickered. "Tommy?" she whispered, her husband's name trembling on her lips. Duke rose slowly, tail wagging. He walked toward her, sniffed, and pressed his head into her chest. Tears streamed down Carol's face. "I thought I lost you." Hawkeye watched, silent as a piece of her heart healed. "I'm not here to take him," Carol said, looking at Sarah. "He belongs with her now. But maybe I could visit? I don't have family anymore." Hawkeye smiled gently. "Then you just found one." In the waiting room, Red burst in, laptop in hand. The video went national. CNN picked it up, 2 million views. GoFundMe's at 90 grand and rising. Calls poured in. Lawyers, doctors, ordinary people offering help. The community that had once turned away was now awake. Rick's phone rang. His attorney. "Rick, the board's panicking. Stocks are falling. They're calling an emergency session. They want to negotiate, reinstate employees, settle lawsuits, anything to stop the bleeding." Rick turned to Hawkeye, a spark of purpose reigniting in his eyes. "I have leverage now," he said quietly. "The truth, the pressure, the public. If I threaten to expose everything they've done." He didn't finish, but for the first time that day, hope stirred again. Faint, fragile, but alive. Sometimes hope doesn't roar, it whispers. It hides in the quiet moments between heartbeats, and the courage to keep breathing when everything feels lost. "Then make them deal," Hawkeye said. At 8:45, the neurologist stepped out of Jenny's ICU room. Her face was carefully neutral, but her eyes carried a glimmer of something fragile. "Hope. Mrs. Hayes is stable," she said softly. "The EEG shows no brain damage from the cardiac event. She's responding to treatment. She's not out of danger yet." The doctor paused, allowing herself a small, tired smile. "But she's fighting, and right now, that's what matters." Sarah woke to the news, delivered gently by Hawkeye, with Ethan standing beside him. The little girl blinked, confused, her voice trembling. "This is my son, Ethan," Hawkeye explained quietly. "I thought I'd lost him, but he found his way back, just like your mom is fighting her way back to you." Sarah's eyes filled with cautious hope. "Is Mommy going to be okay?" "The doctors think so," Hawkeye said. "And look who else is here." Carol Mitchell stepped forward, her voice warm but unsure. "Hi, Sarah, I'm Carol. I was married to Duke's first handler. I came to see Duke, but I don't want to take him from you. I'd like to be friends if that's okay." Sarah looked at Duke, then at Carol. "You won't take him?" "Never," Carol said softly. "He's yours, but maybe sometimes we can visit each other. I could tell you stories. About his training, about my husband, about the firefighters." Sarah's tears came, not from despair this time, but from the overwhelming relief that needed release. Carol sat beside her, holding the little girl, a woman who understood loss, choosing kindness over legal rights. In the hallway, Wrench's phone rang. His old supervisor's voice burst through the line. "Marcus, you won't believe this. The board just fired Carlos Ruiz. Effective immediately. They're bringing in an outside CEO and reinstating all 12 terminated employees with full back pay. They're even covering Hayes' medical bills." The publicity scared them into actual decency. The tide was turning. Slowly, imperfectly, but turning. Rick stood apart, watching families reunite, hope flickering in their eyes. He had lost his job, but found something else. Redemption. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother's nursing home. For the first time in months, he replied, "I'll visit tomorrow." "I'm sorry I stayed away so long." Ethan sat with Sarah, telling her about running away, about finding courage, about family. Sarah listened, Duke's head in her lap, Carol's arm around her shoulders. An unlikely family formed from fragments. Hawkeye stood in the doorway, his heart full. His son had returned. A little girl was gaining hope. Strangers were becoming family. The darkness hadn't vanished. Jenny still fought for her life, but light had broken through the cracks. Sometimes hope arrived not as thunder, but as phone calls from lost sons, as widows choosing generosity over grief, as viral videos shaming corporations into humanity, as communities remembering they were meant to care for one another. It wasn't a perfect ending, not yet, but it was a beginning, a breath after drowning. 3 days later, Jenny awoke to autumn sunlight streaming through the hospital window, her daughter's small hand wrapped in hers. Machines had been reduced to one gentle monitor, beeping steady reassurance. Her body ached with exhaustion, but she was alive. "Mommy?" Sarah whispered, afraid to believe. "Hey, baby." Jenny's voice was weak but real. "I'm here. I'm okay." Sarah burst into tears, climbing carefully onto the bed as Duke nestled beside them. Jenny held her tight, feeling how thin her daughter had become, understanding the cost of her own collapse. They cried together, relief, grief, gratitude, while Duke stood guard, Jenny's recovery would be long. Nutrition therapy, insulin management, physical therapy, counseling for trauma, but she was stable. Healing, alive. Jake's presence lingered, in the dog he'd given them, in the firefighter brotherhood that had rallied, in Sarah's courage to ask for help. Jenny touched the wedding ring she still wore and whispered, "Thank you for sending Duke, for watching over us." Down the hall, Hawkeye and Ethan sat together over coffee and hot chocolate, learning each other again. 5 years apart couldn't be bridged in days. But they were trying. "I want to live with you," Ethan said, "if that's okay. I know there'll be custody stuff, but we'll figure it out." Hawkeye reached across the table, gripping his son's hand. "However long it takes, I'm not losing you again." Later, Ethan and Sarah finally met as kids, not survivors. They sat in the waiting room, Duke between them, sharing stories about losing and finding family. Ethan showed Sarah pictures of the motorcycle he was learning to ride. Sarah showed him her homework, proud that she'd kept up through everything. Two kids who'd grown up too fast, remembering what it felt like to be children again. Rick visited Jenny before her discharge. No lawyers, no cameras, just a man carrying guilt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "What I did was wrong. I can't undo it. But I'll spend the rest of my life making sure it doesn't happen to others." Jenny looked at him for a long moment. "I forgive you," she said. "But promise me, you won't let others suffer." "I promise." Rick kept that promise. He founded an employee advocacy nonprofit to help workers fight wrongful termination. He testified against the board, providing evidence of retaliation and discrimination. He sold his condo, lived simply, and slept peacefully for the first time in years. Peace, it turned out, was worth more than corner offices. The company restructured. Employees now owned 40%. Jenny returned not as a worker, but as director of employee relations, protecting others from what she had endured. The other 11 employees were reinstated. Maggie Chen started a weekly community dinner, bringing together the lonely and the struggling. Carol joined her, sharing firefighter stories. The neighborhood that once watched Jenny suffer in silence became a family. Neighbors checked on neighbors. Strangers became kin. 3 months later, on a December evening, Sarah and Duke walked home from school. Elm Street had transformed. Christmas lights glowing, laughter spilling from open doors. Community reborn. At Maggie's home, the weekly dinner was alive with warmth. Jenny arrived healthy and strong. Hawkeye and Ethan rolled up on motorcycles. Rick brought dessert. Carol set the table. The once broken pieces had become a mosaic of love. On the wall hung Sarah's old cardboard sign, "Duke, good dog, $50 or best offer." Below it, a family photo of everyone. Sarah's handwriting read, "This is where we were. This is where we are." They sat down to dinner together, passing food and laughter. Duke rested under the table, his head on Sarah's feet. Outside, snow dusted the mountains as the sunset painted the sky in promises of tomorrow. Hawkeye looked around the table, his son beside him, Sarah laughing, Jenny strong, Maggie beaming, Rick at peace, and whispered, "We save each other. That's how we survive." Glasses were raised. "To saving each other," echoed around the table. Duke's tail thumped against the floor. Outside, stars bloomed across the winter sky. Inside, people who had once been strangers shared food, warmth, and the certainty that none of them would ever face darkness alone again. It wasn't a perfect ending. Jenny still carried trauma. Sarah still had nightmares. Hawkeye still battled PTSD. Rick still wrestled with guilt. The world's systems remained imperfect, but here, around this table, they had enough. They had each other. They had Duke, a living symbol of loyalty and love, proof that one act of courage, a child selling her dog, a stranger stopping to help, a widow choosing kindness, can start a chain reaction strong enough to change everything. The world wasn't fixed, but this corner of it was healing, and sometimes that's miracle enough.